10.2 is the best time to play melee DPS because melee DPS is fun. We're gonna check out the most fun melee DPS, at least in my subjective opinion, because we're not ranking them with damage or meta or performance as well, although that sometimes matter. But what matters is the design, the feel, the rotation, the reward, and actually a little bit of damage, because if you do dog shit damage, you're gonna do dog shit damage, it's not gonna be good for anybody. And as always, we're gonna be starting it off with arms. Such a big loser, dude. And it's one of my all-time favorite melees, possibly thematically my favorite melee in World of Warcraft, period, and it hasn't been less fun to play than it has now. I'm not a fan of the tier set and what it does to the rotation. I'm not a fan of, listen, we criticized arms in BFA for having most of its damage profile into deep wounds and bleeds, and that was not really what arms was supposed to be, and now we don't have that, but still, I don't feel good about pressing execute. It doesn't do the damage that I want it to do. And this is not necessarily about the raw amount of overall DPS and performance of arms, but when I press execute, I want to feel like it executes my target. It does less damage than Mortal Strike, man. How does that make sense? It doesn't. And that's part of the reason why I personally don't find arms fun. Sure, it is a warrior, it's still tanky, and it still retains some of the things that I like about arms, which is why it's not down in the dumpster D tier, but it's fine. It's in C4. Can we get good arms back, please? Because damn, man, I miss arms. But let's move on to the more fun side of things, and that's with rogues. And for Assassination, you know it's a blast in raids and in M+, but it's not an easy spec to get into, especially if you want to main it after the rework. The way I was able to work on my Assassination and improve some kinks in my gameplay is by analyzing some dungeons I did after recording them with Outplayed. The app just makes it super easy to look over your gameplay and even cut clips off to share them on your socials or Discord. This makes it cool for people to watch your plays, give you feedback, or simply just awe at your gamer chops. Outplayed is free and easy to get. Simply click the link in the description to get yours really quick and support the Marcelian&Online team in the process. Thank you Outplayed for sponsoring this video. Whether or not you're going to be good at Assassination or some other specs, Assassination is still a fun spec. How fun is? Well, it's not D tier. Is it C tier for arms? Nah. It's better than arms, right? B tier? What are you doing? B tier Assassination? S tier, baby! Oh man, what they did to Assassination this year is incredible. It is so fun. It is so fun. It's the funnest I've ever played Assassination, and the rogue rework is amazing. I actually feel like a rogue, and I really enjoyed playing Assassination because we did some videos on it. But it just feels right. The bleeds feel right, the poisons feel right, the fact that I'm choosing a target and I'm assassinating it and I still do AoE damage because, you know, it just works. I love it. I love it. Assassination is the most fun it has ever been in 10.2 for me personally, and I dare somebody say otherwise that has also played the current version of Assassination, because I bet you, but you haven't, if you don't think Assassination is at least S tier. We don't have higher than S tier because it is what it is. Outlaw is also part of the Rogue Bonanza fantastic reworks. It's not as good as Assassination, so I'm gonna put it into A tier, but dude, it's so fun. And I never really thought they could make Outlaw mash more buttons faster than it does. Or than it did rather. Last time I played it across WoW, of course, but last time I really played it was at the end of Shadowlands in the Faded season. I played a lot of Outlaw Rogue and I loved it, but damn did I have to press buttons. Little did past Flame know that future Flame would be playing an even bigger piano spec with the current Outlaw. And dude, what is it, Crackshot? Dude, Crackshot? Whoever thought a Crackshot is a genius. Genius, Reels? That you, man? If you thought a Crackshot, you're a genius, man. Please design my entire life. Reels is, if you don't know, one of the devs that actually works on Rogue and also Demon Hunter, but Rogue in this case, and Crackshot just shooting between the eyes again and again and again and again and back to back to back to back to back to back is fan-fucking-tastic, man. I just feel really good doing Outlaw. And now we have the stop talking about fun things and go back to mediocre things. Survival Hunter. Survival Hunter is usually, it has been for years, but not anymore, my second favorite melee spec, if not sometimes my favorite in terms of how it plays, but it just doesn't feel the same again. I'm gonna put it into C tier for caca, because the problem with survival, I feel, it just stands in its overall design of the spec, because what's making survival really fun is there, but it's kind of implemented very, very weirdly. I don't want to take shots at survivals because I feel like I've criticized this spec for over a year at this point, and it just doesn't seem to get any better. I love the theme of a super agile, fast jumping in, spear wielding melee DPS. Throwing bombs is fun. Cleaving things is fun, Fury of the Eagle is fun, but when that's kind of all you do and with no actual death, because Wildfire Infusion hasn't been super impactful since I feel like BFA, where sure you might want to poison out when you do the green bomb and you might want to spread those bleeds when you get the blue bomb, it just doesn't really feel like it. You can probably ignore the effects of Wildfire Infusion and still do really good damage, and that's not how the spec should be. Spearhead was one of the cooler things that the spec does, and it's the least thing that the spec does in this entire expansion. It not only is a bad design cooldown, you don't really want to use it with Coordinate Assault still. Maybe now, but at least in the first season, you never really wanted to use it. In the second season, you kind of didn't really want to use it. And even now, you probably shouldn't use it together with Coordinate Assault because the design just contradicts itself. And that's not what you want in a DPS spec. Building the spec takes way too much study and research. And that's, once again, not what you need to do when you build a spec. I'm sorry, Survival. Love you, but just nah. Enhancement Shaman also one of my favorite melee specs, has actually retained to be one of the most fun melees in the game. Now, it doesn't really come close to Rogue. It is kind of fun, but it feels like it's missing that impact, which I know a lot of people will argue with, because Enhancement is actually in a very good state, both meta-wise and actually fun-wise and design-wise. I feel like it's just a smidge below Rogue. It's a good spec. I want to put it so bad into A tier. I just cannot bring it close to Outlaw in terms of fun, even though usually Enhancement is my jam. I feel like the design is good, but it's just missing that oomph, that whoa, what's going on here? Because I think the problem, if you take Rogue out of the picture, Enhancement could be an easy S tier fun DPS, but now that you have Rogue in it just raised the bar for everything. I'm not the biggest fan of Elemental Blast on Enhancement. It's fun, but it doesn't feel like it's that impactful. Enhancement for me, in terms of what I considered fun, has always been Wind Fury weapons and big Storm Strikes, or even really fat Lava Lashes. But for a spec like Enhancement, you gotta have that big moment, and that usually most of the time came with either Storm Strike or Wind Fury, considering that Lava Lash kind of works around doing, not necessarily doing dot damage, but you spread Flame Shock around. Sure, Lava Lash hits hard, but that's usually the Storm Strike role. So that's kind of why it's in B tier. I'm not knocking it off. It's still a good spec. It's probably one of the best melee specs in the game, and it is fun, I admit. It just doesn't come close to the other ones. Feral, however, has surprised me in how fun it has been. As opposed to Enhancement, Feral kind of has some of those cool moments when you just get back-to-back procs, back-to-back combo points. Playing with Incarn is just a combo point flood of bonanza, and the fact that you can also squeeze in some Convokes every now and again is really fun, and I hope that Convoke makes a comeback for the entire Druid class. Feral is actually really cool with the Apex procs. You kind of get, I don't want to call it a budget rogue, because it's maybe a little bit of a budget rogue, but Feral does other things, because, you know, Feral has always been compared with Assassination. It's not as fun as Assassination, and it's not as in-depth as Assassination, but it's more reactive, or more actually managing your resource a little bit more properly. Assassination plays more into the planning part, Feral plays more into the execution part, although execution can be said about all of the specs, but you're a Druid at the end of the day. Feral is the best way to DPS as a Druid, and this is coming from a balance main, mind you. It's just missing that little bit of a single target to be a main for me, but that's what Feral is. Unholy DK is not next. It's actually Frost Decay. I was hoping it would be Unholy Decay so I can say some good things about Decay, but unfortunately it is Frost. Frost, after so many good class reworks, just feels like a leftover spec, my dude. I don't particularly mind the playstyle of Frost, and I don't think the tier set makes it any worse. If anything, makes it a little bit better. But the fact that it's still the same spec as it was for like 3 expansions straight, dude, what are we doing with Frost Decay? I was almost sure we're gonna get a rework in 10.2. Obviously, that didn't happen, and we're just getting Chill Streak to kind of like keep us busy until they actually rework Frost. It's unbelievably atrocious compared to Rogue. Not even talking about Red. It was already falling behind after the Red rework and showing us what a melee DPS can do. But now when you look at Frost Decay, it's just bland. It's like a flavorless ice cream. It just doesn't bring it anymore, man. Breath is the same, obliteration is the same, and that's about it. All of the talents that you could have, and mind you, has better talent design than Survival Hunter, and still it kind of falls flat on its face. Very big travesty when it comes to Frost Decay, and I really hope that they bring back the flavor of the Frosty Boys. I feel like this spec, from a flavor perspective, lore perspective, and what it can actually accomplish with big obliterate crits, has so much potential that is just wasted in what Frost has to do with these days. Fury Warrior is maybe slightly different. I want to put it in maybe in front of Arms. I'm gonna put it into B tier. It's a little bit more fun. Obviously the tier set is very spammy and I'm not a fan of the tier set. However, I don't feel like the tier set is hurting it as much as it does Arms in terms of overall fun, of course. We're not talking about damage here, but it just adds more spamminess to it. And to be fair, at the end of the day, that is what Fury is. It's spamminess. I'm not saying you mindlessly press your buttons and things just happen. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that you don't really have to think too much about yours. You just go. You just push the pedal to the floor and you go, and you don't stop until the boss is dead or you're dead, which is what Fury usually does best. Sure, it could use a little bit more. Sure, it could use some proper design, proper burst, talent diversity, more awesome things that Fury could potentially do, but I think right now is just, when you want to take a break, I think it's just fine. Havoc Demon Hunter has also taken a big leap when it comes to its design. It's definitely a lot more fun, and it definitely has a lot more interesting talent design. It doesn't ring as high for me as the other specs though. Now this is definitely as personal biases go. That's just where Havoc is at the moment. It's a good spec. I feel obviously it's the best melee DPS at this point of recording of the video. It's a little bit recorded ahead of time. I don't know if they just hit the nerfs hard on Havoc while this video is in production, but in terms of fun, you know, nerfs don't really have anything to do with it. In terms of fun, it's there. It's fun to zip zap around. It's probably the most fun Havoc has been ever. It just feels like the other specs just do it a lot better. And still, it's top of the B tier. B tier is not bad. B is for better than all the rest, more than anything. It is fun. You'll have, if you've enjoyed Havoc at any point in time in the past couple of expansions, you're definitely gonna love it now. And it's fine for me, it's just not as good as the other ones. Red Paladin, however, will always remain a very solid spec. Now, I don't know if Red is in front, maybe it's a little bit in front of Feral. It's a little bit more fun than Feral. I feel like it's definitely designed better than Feral. You're still very tanky, you're still very responsive. It's nice to deal that damage. It's nice to be a Paladin and have a lot of utilities to, you know, help your group out. That's actually a source of fun that not a lot of people talk about. The fact that, oh my god, I'm a red, I can actually help that guy. That gives me a fun little snippet of what the red can do, and I think it's pretty good. It doesn't have that big of a talent diversity, which is probably what's keeping it from being closer and maybe better than Outlaw Rogue. I feel like Outlaw is definitely better, which is why I've placed red behind Outlaw, but it's definitely one of the best melee specs designed still to this day. It's just missing that oomph that the Rogue has. And speaking of oomph, I have never thought I would do this, ever. Usually this is what Marcelian does. Marcelian just puts sub above everything else because why wouldn't he? It's so predictable, so much sub. But damn, what did they do to Subtlety? I feel like this is the perfect melee spec for me currently. It doesn't do as much damage, granted, and that kind of really matters. And I've always loved, in terms of flavor and fantasy, I've loved Assassination more, which is always this conflict between Assassination and Sub, but in terms of pure design and execution, Subtlety has to be it. The fact that you can play Shadow Dust builds and actually reduce the cooldowns on a lot of abilities and kind of match them to the fight. Oh, I need my cooldown slightly faster this time, or I need my cooldowns a lot faster this time. I can do both depending on how I execute my spec and actually have burst more or less when I need to, instead of just, oh, I guess I just have to wait for the clock to tick and just wait for my cooldowns to come back up. Sub is definitely the way you do it. The design of Sub is really good. I think it would be perfect if I could also play Gormaw, because I loved Gormaw and I'm also a DPS horse, so I have to wait until Gormaw gets buffed to be able to play it. And it just doesn't do it right now. However, Sub is fantastic. It's very close to Assassination, by the way. It's so close. It's so close to lose out to Assassination. If they nerf... I don't think they're gonna nerf the damage of Subtlety, but if they nerf Shadow Dust for some reason, or if they don't buff the other ones really soon, it could be that Assassination might overtake it slightly. But at the very least, these are the most fun melees so far in the S tier. We still have 2 more, but if I would have to recommend anybody, any melee DPS spec to play in 10.2, Subtlety and Assassination are definitely the first I will go to. Unholy DK has also seen very little change in Dragonflight. I'm gonna put this into B tier. I love it a little bit more than Havoc, a lot more. Normally, Unholy is usually an A tier level of fun for me. A very good ult that I always go to, but it just feels slightly bland. I think the biggest issue that I have with Unholy is twofold in terms of its fun. First of all, it's the damage. Although the damage is not necessarily a big criterion to considering how fun it is, the fact that Unholy kind of works a little bit for its rotation and it's not getting the payoff that it needs, or it needs PI to actually feel relevant, is atrocious. I don't think that's okay, considering the amount of cooldowns that you have to juggle, the resources that you have to juggle, and so on. It's not as difficult as it used to be in the past, but it's not super easy either. Definitely maybe easier than Enhancement, definitely easier than Enhancement, but harder than pretty much all of the specs in B, C, and D tier for sure. But I feel like, and the second thing is, and this is part of my main issue with Unholy, bursting swords is no longer a thing. Bursting swords felt like some of the highest skilled thing that you can do as an Unholy DK, and just using that quadratic scaling to deal giga damage. That was the most fun I've ever had in Unholy, and that was back in BFA. They've systematically nerfed it since, because some people in the MDI can pull it off, while 99% of the other Unholies cannot fathom to be able to do this because it's so specific and so restrictive. I felt like that was what was missing from the spec. That's what Subtlety has and what Unholy doesn't. Subtlety has that level of, oh, if I can just master this one thing, I'm just going to knock all of the other Subtlety rogues out of the park. And Unholy used to have that, and that's very fun for me. I like to feel like if I invest time, dedication, and loyalty to the spec, I'll be rewarded with a much better performance than everybody else, because it's fun to, you know, do big giga damage, but it just feels like very flat. I'm not a big fan of the disease build, even though I love the theme of Unholy so much, and I love Gargoyle. The other things just kind of keep it level-headed for me, instead of just it being like A tier, or I think only a rework can put it into S tier right now. But at least it could be A tier with a little bit more love. Windwalker is part of the please give us a rework gang, and although it is part of the give us a rework gang, I don't feel like it needs a rework as bad as Frost Decay or Survival Hunter, and it is probably slightly more fun. I'm gonna put it into C tier, because usually I like Survival a little bit more, and Windwalker kind of feels clunky. After playing Mistweaver, which is obviously not the same thing, but Mistweaver is in melee, Mistweaver has Feline Stomp as well, Mistweaver rotates around and punches things a little bit. And if that's more fun than current Windwalker, then Windwalker has an issue. It's still a spec that can have some massive potential in its design and the cool things that it can do. Probably be better than Rogue if handled properly, maybe by the same designer. I'm not gonna say anything about that, but the fact that it's missing the mark on a lot of these things, and Mistweaver feels more satisfying to play than Windwalker. That just knocks it down a peg a lot for me. And it's not fair to compare Windwalker to a healer DPS spec, but that's the reason why I like both of these specs, is because of what they can both do very similarly. Be in melee, punch, move around a lot. With Mistweaver I heal, with Windwalker I just double down on the punches and the kicks. And that's just doesn't feel like that does it for me in 10.2. I'm sure a lot of people love it. I'm sure you enjoy Windwalker, but it's not the same as the other specs, and definitely not the same as Subtlety Rogue, which is my current top favorite melee DPS specs. And hey, if you're not convinced, you can check this video out and see why Subtlety Rogue is so good. Click it on the screen and you'll get all the tidbits as to why the spec is good, with a dash of bias, of course, but at least more objectiveness than this tier list has, for sure.